No one on set could have predicted what would unfold that afternoon. An encounter so tense, so razor-sharp in emotion, that even the most seasoned crew members stood frozen in place. It began with a rumor, a fragment of a statement Sam Heughan allegedly made during an off-camera conversation that somehow slipped out into the public sphere. The shocking claim, as tabloids later called it, ignited fan speculation overnight. But the situation turned explosive only when Caitríona Balfe's husband, Tony McGill, arrived unannounced on set, his expression controlled yet filled with a quiet fury no one had ever seen from him before. As he moved through the hallway toward the rehearsal room where Sam stood reviewing lines, the air thickened with anticipation. Crew members exchanged nervous glances, whispering urgently but unable to intervene. Everyone felt the shift instantly, the type of silence that warns something irreversible is about to happen. Sam didn't notice Tony at first. He was leaning against a table, flipping through script pages, oblivious to the growing storm gathering behind him. It wasn't until a makeup artist stepped aside, eyes wide, that Sam finally turned around and saw Caitríona's husband standing just a few feet away. The moment their eyes met, something in the room seemed to snap. Sam straightened slowly, his expression tightening into cautious confusion. Tony's presence alone was enough to send a ripple of unease through the space. He rarely came to set, and never without Caitríona. Today, however, she wasn't with him. And that absence spoke louder than any confrontation could. The tension thickened as Tony approached, each step measured but loaded with intent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the hum of equipment felt suddenly loud in the vacuum of sound. Sam glanced around the room, as if searching for context, but no one dared move. Tony stopped only an arm's length away from him, shoulders squared, voice low enough that those closest had to strain to hear. "We need to talk," he said, not as a request, but as a demand. Sam blinked, startled. He nodded slowly, but before he could respond further, Tony continued, his tone edged with tightly restrained anger. "I want to hear from you directly about what you claimed." The words hit the room like a fist against glass. Sam's jaw tightened. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he answered, carefully measured. But the way Tony's eyes narrowed made clear he wasn't here for diplomacy. Crew members subtly backed away, giving them space but unwilling to lose sight of what was happening. The atmosphere was suffocating, a collision of emotions years in the making, of boundaries blurred and resentments long ignored. Sam tried to keep his voice steady as he explained, but Tony cut him off, stepping closer. "Misunderstanding?" he echoed. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." Just then, the door opened, and Caitríona stepped inside. The moment she saw them, Tony glaring, Sam tense, her face drained of color. "Tony," she said, voice trembling with urgency, "stop." She moved quickly toward them, placing herself between the two men, her hands slightly raised as if physically holding back the weight of the moment. Sam's eyes flicked toward her, filled with a mixture of guilt, confusion, and something more complex that no one could decipher. Tony's expression tightened further, not because of Sam, but because of the visible fear in his wife's eyes. "Caitríona," Tony said quietly, "I asked him a question." She shook her head, the panic in her voice barely controlled. "This isn't the place." But Sam, sensing the rising pressure, tried to speak. "Whatever you heard, let's clear it now. I don't want this to hang over anyone." His tone was calm, but there was a tremor beneath it, an acknowledgement that the situation was spiraling into something more personal than he had intended. What happened next sent a shiver across the room. Tony leaned in slightly, his jaw clenched, and said something only the three of them could hear. Whatever it was, it made Sam's expression falter, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before he masked it again. Caitríona looked down, breathing unevenly. The crew exchanged alarmed glances. No one dared move, no one dared speak. And just as quickly as he arrived, Tony stepped back, exhaled sharply, and said one final low, deliberate sentence, one that left Sam standing frozen in place, unable to respond. Within seconds, Tony turned and walked out, leaving a stunned silence trembling through the entire room. Caitríona closed her eyes, pressing a hand against her forehead as if everything had finally reached a breaking point. No one knew what Tony had said, but everyone knew one thing. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The tension from Tony's confrontation lingered long after he walked out of the room. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable, the kind that settles into the walls and refuses to leave. Crew members whispered cautiously as they returned to their tasks, but every glance floated towards Sam and Caitríona. She remained standing where Tony had left her, one hand pressed to her forehead, breathing heavily as though she was holding back a storm of emotions. Sam didn't move. He stood rooted to the spot, Tony's final words echoing in his ears, cutting deeper than anything he had expected to hear that day. No one knew exactly what Tony had said, but the shift in Sam's expression had revealed enough. He looked wounded, blindsided, and perhaps even guilty, though whether the guilt belonged to the shocking claim or something deeper was impossible to decipher. When Caitríona finally lifted her gaze, her eyes landed on Sam, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The weight between them, years of friendship, trust, tension, and unspoken emotions, pressed into the space like an invisible force. She took a slow step toward him, but her voice wavered when she finally spoke. "I didn't know he was coming here," she said. "I'm sorry." Sam shook his head, though the gesture lacked conviction. "He's upset," he replied quietly. "He thinks I said something I didn't." But even as he said it, his voice carried uncertainty. Uncertainty about whether his intentions had been misunderstood, or whether someone had twisted his words into something else entirely. Caitríona clasped her hands together, her fingers trembling. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, unsure where to begin. The two of them stood together, suspended between explanation and silence, when a crew member gently called Caitríona away for a wardrobe adjustment. She hesitated, glancing at Sam one last time before stepping out of the room. The moment she disappeared, a low murmur spread across the set. People who had witnessed the confrontation began piecing together fragments of what they had seen. One assistant whispered that she had caught a glimpse of Tony's phone, a message thread, a screenshot, something that looked like a quote attributed to Sam. Another claimed Tony muttered the words, "You crossed a line," before he left. Even the director looked shaken, muttering under his breath about needing to keep the production from collapsing under drama that wasn't in the script. But the most revealing account came from a crew member who had been standing nearest during the confrontation. According to him, the shocking claim at the center of the storm had started from a fan-captured video where Sam, during an off-guard moment at a convention, appeared to hint that his bond with Caitríona was more complicated than people think. The clip went viral overnight, with fans dissecting every syllable. Some believed Sam had confessed deeper feelings. Others insisted it was a misinterpretation. Tony, already protective of Caitríona, saw the clip without context, and it ignited every quiet insecurity he had suppressed over the years. As the day progressed, the atmosphere grew more fragile. Caitríona returned from her wardrobe adjustment looking shaken, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been crying. When Sam approached her gently and asked if she was all right, she inhaled sharply and looked away. "I didn't ask him to do this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You know that." Sam nodded, but the pain in his expression deepened. "It's not your fault," he said softly. "But whatever he thinks I meant, it's hurting you. And that's what I never wanted." Their conversation was interrupted by the director calling them back to set, but the energy between them had shifted profoundly. In the scene they were asked to film, a quiet, emotional exchange, the rawness of their off-screen turmoil seeped into their performances. Every glance looked heavier, every touch loaded, every breath charged with tension that the script alone couldn't explain. The crew watched in stunned silence. Some admitted later that it was the most powerful scene the two had delivered in months, precisely because it wasn't acting anymore. It was two people trying to hold themselves together as the world threatened to pull them apart. After the scene wrapped, Sam pulled Caitríona aside one last time before she left for the evening. His voice was low, controlled but shaking underneath. "Tell him," Sam said quietly, "that I never meant to disrespect him." Or you. Whatever he heard, whatever someone told him, it's not the truth. Caitríona nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. I know, she whispered. But you also know this isn't just about one comment. This has been building for a long time. Sam didn't disagree. He couldn't. As she turned to leave, she hesitated, glancing back at him with an expression that held years of history, gratitude, frustration, affection, regret. Just, be careful with your words, Sam, she murmured. People listen, even the ones who weren't meant to. And then she was gone. Left alone in the dim hallway, Sam exhaled deeply, realizing that the confrontation was not an ending, but the first crack in something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more personal than he had ever anticipated.